Good evening. I'm Judy Woodruff. On the NewsHour tonight, Special Counsel Robert Mueller delivers his long-awaited final report to the Department of Justice after nearly 2 years of investigation. Mark Shields, David Brooks, and others are here to consider what's at stake now that Mueller has completed his investigation into Russia and the Trump campaign. Then America's heartland braces for disaster and a potentially ruined farm season as floodwaters rise along the Missouri River. All that and more on tonight's PBS NewsHour. The long-awaited moment is here. Special Counsel Robert Mueller has delivered his final report to the Department of Justice. As of now, we don't know what's in it. It hasn't been made public. Mueller and his team of prosecutors have been investigating Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and any potential links to the Trump campaign. Here with me now are Capitol Hill and our White House correspondents, Lisa Desjardins and Yamiche Alcindor. So hello to both of you. We've been waiting for this moment. Lisa, as I turn to you to hear about how this report was delivered, I want to say that there are now multiple news organizations who are reporting that the special counsel is not recommending any further indictments. So that is the only detail that we've been made aware of so far. But what do we know about the delivery of these documents to the Department of Justice?
Just in the past 2 hours, Congress received this letter. These are the 4 leaders of the House and Senate Judiciary Committees were notified by the Attorney General right there. I want to pull out a couple of quotes from this. One at the top, you see, he wrote, "The special counsel has submitted to me today a confidential report explaining the prosecution of declination decisions." And then Acting Attorney General Barr writes, "I may be in a position to advise you of the special counsel's principal conclusions," this is important, "as soon as this weekend." Also notes, there were no instances that the Attorney General objected to conclusions, methods, or recommendations by Mr. Mueller. The Attorney General has the right to review the report and decline to forward prosecutorial recommendations, those kinds of things. Here, the Attorney General is saying, I had no disagreements like that with Mr. Mueller. And that's very significant because already we're seeing this on more firm ground, at least in the Justice Department. Because there were questions about whether there might be interference on the part of the Attorney General, who was appointed by President Trump and is overseeing this investigation. So, Yamiche, the White House has word of this. What are they saying?
Well, the White House is so far saying that they are waiting for the next steps. But the biggest thing here is that there are no further indictments being recommended. That's a big deal. Allies of the president are saying that that's evidence that this is really a waste of time, that in 2 years they didn't indict anybody for obstructing justice or for colluding with Russia. The president has not yet spoken, but I want to turn to a bite that interview that he gave to Fox News where he talked about the fact that there's no collusion. He's called it a witch hunt, but let's hear what he had to say.
I have a deputy appoints a man to write a report on me to make a determination on my presidency. People will not stand for it. Now, with all of that being said, for 2 years we've gone through this nonsense because there's no collusion with Russia. You know that better than anybody. And there's no obstruction. They'll say, oh, well, wait, there was no collusion. That was a hoax. But he obstructed in fighting against the hoax, okay?
Now, sources close to President Trump and their reports that he is happy and glad that this is over. This, of course, has been a 2-year cloud over his presidency. After the midterms, when he started talking about what was going to be next and what legislatively he could do with a democratically controlled Congress, he started talking about investigations. He started talking very quickly about the Mueller probe and about the idea that people were after him and thought that because he was someone who was not expected to win, that he was not a legitimate president. So he's always looked at the Mueller probe with some really angry eyes. But Sarah Sanders, the White House press secretary, has responded. Again, we're still waiting for the president to tweet. And if that happens on the air, someone will hopefully tell us. But I want to read out Sarah Sanders' tweet, which is, the next steps are up to Attorney General Barr, and we look forward to the process taking its course. The White House has not received or been briefed on the special counsel's report. they have it. That means the White House doesn't really know much more than us at this point. I'm told that Secretary Nielsen, which of course was the head of the Department of Homeland Security, she was at Trump Hotel. She had no idea that this was coming. There are multiple people around the president who really didn't know the timing of this. Just today, I was on the White House lawn, and we asked the president, when do you think the Mueller report is going to be released? He said, I have no idea. I will also turn, though, to another ally of the president, Corey Lewandowski. He's someone who was in the orbit of the president, someone that maybe people thought might get indicted for colluding with Russia. He said the witch hunt is over. Make the report public. That echoes what the president has been saying. He said on the lawn at the White House while I was there, this was yesterday, saying that the Mueller report should be released to the public. We don't know if that's going to happen, though.
Important, the point they're making about not knowing when this was coming, what's in it, because they want to make it clear to say to the world, we didn't have anything to do with this. We were independent. Lisa, we've seen a letter from the Democratic leaders in the House and the Senate, Speaker Pelosi,
right.
Chuck Schumer. They are saying make the report entirely public.
That's right. And in fact, Judy, it's interesting. I've got that statement right here. They're saying this investigation was focused on questions that go to the integrity of our democracy. And they write, the American people have a right to the truth. And it's notable, Judy, that the House voted 420-0 to say that that the full House of Representatives believes this report should be released in public. The Senate did not take that vote. Why? Senator Lindsey Graham, who is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, blocked that vote because he said he has concerns about the Clinton investigation. He was trying to leverage that vote into another new special counsel. But the point is the Senate has not voted on this idea yet. Every Senate statement I see tonight says they would like a public release. Obviously, we see the Attorney General Barr thinking about this over the weekend, preparing at least to brief leaders and then decide what he will release to the public. It is his decision.
Do we know at this point whether there will be a briefing tonight or when it will happen? Other than saying, I hope to have more this weekend?
I do not have that reporting, but I would expect that there are staffers on Capitol Hill being briefed tonight. And we do know from leaders, they are saying they expect briefings soon, if not this weekend.
And Yamiche, I was going to say, the president has been saying it should be made public, but we don't know. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen.
The reason why we should take the president saying this should be made public with a large grain of salt is because the president also said he was going to sit down with Robert Mueller. He said, I wanted to sit down. I want to sit down with an interview. I want to be able to defend myself. In fact, he never did that. Instead, he sent in written statements to a very small number of questions. He did not want to be talk about Russian collusion and all sorts of other things. I also want to read a text because I'm texting with Rudy Giuliani as we're on air, so excuse that. But I said, is there any reaction to Mueller not recommending any more indictments? And he wrote, it sounds like it's over. So this is, again, an ally of the president, of course, the president's personal lawyer, saying this is all meaning that we are clear. We're in the clear that the president, what he's been saying over the last 2 years, this vindicates him. Now, that's really early to say because we don't exactly know what's in the report, but at least the Trump camp is saying that.
All right. And Lisa, back to these reports, again, multiple news organizations saying it's their information that this Mueller report does not recommend any more indictments. There have been indictments. If there aren't any more, if that is borne out to be the case, we don't know whether that includes the president. We know there's some debate about whether or not a sitting president can be indicted.
That's correct. So it's not clear. Are there things in this report that raise questions about the president that Democrats will look into further in Congress? It seems that we've known all along that Special Counsel Mueller has known more than anyone else in Washington about the activities of the Trump campaign and the president himself. What does this report reveal? An indictment might not be the only issue here for the president. I will raise a summary of what's happened. Let's just to back up of what Mueller's done. This investigation, Mueller was appointed 675 days ago, May of 2017. So it's been quite a while, not quite 2 years. And by my count, he has so far indicted, and if in fact this is the full list of indictments, 34 people as part of this probe. The vast majority of them are Russian nationals. And they have not been brought into courts here in the United States. They've been indicted here, while many of them are overseas. And then the others, the Americans who've been indicted as part of this, most of them have taken plea deals as part of this as well. Right now, it looks like Paul Manafort may be the person who has the largest sentencing time. Roger Stone, Michael Cohen, we'll see what happens with them in future cases as well.
And of course, these are individuals who've had a close relationship with the president. All right, Lisa, Yamiche, we're going to ask you to stand by as we continue to follow these fast-moving developments. We are keeping our focus on what the conclusion of the special counsel's investigation could mean with Amy Jeffress. She is a former federal prosecutor who also served as counselor to the Attorney General for National Security. And John Carlin. He served for several years as the Assistant Attorney General for National Security in the Obama administration, and he joins us via Skype. Welcome to both of you. John Carlin, I'm going to start with you. As this is unfolding, and again, we don't know very much at this point, what do we expect to know next? We know the Attorney General has the Mueller final report. What do we believe happens now?
Well, this is really, it's not the end, it's the beginning of a new phase. And I think it's extraordinarily important to focus, as you have already, on what we currently know. So this investigation in a incredibly short period of time for an investigation that covers a complex criminal activity, counterintelligence operations, laundering of monetary funds, has really operated at an unprecedented pace. The report is different than a report might be if it was purely on criminal charges. Over the years, the FBI has changed its reporting requirements when it comes to intelligence threats to our country to make sure that they are briefed out to the rest of the intelligence community and also to the critical oversight committees, the House and Senate intelligence committees. Much of this report seems like it will fall within the scope of that oversight for those intelligence committees. So I would expect one way or the other that the report ends up in their hands.
In the Intelligence Committee's hands. Amy Jeffress, to you next. This early indication, again, through news reports, not through any confirmation from the Justice Department, that the special counsel, Robert Mueller, is not recommending any further indictments. If that's the case, what does that say to you?
Well, that says that the core of the special counsel's work has been completed. So that team has decided that they have brought all of the charges that they felt were within their core mandate. But we already know that there are other investigations that they have referred out to the U.S. attorney's offices that are related, if not within that central ambit of the investigation. So I agree with John. I don't think that this investigation and all of its tentacles have been fully completed. I think that there will be more to come, but it won't be related to the core of the Russian interference in the election per se.
And meaning what? I mean, let's go back and talk about what has been referred, Amy Jeffress, to the Southern District of New York, for example.
That's exactly right. We know that the Cohen piece of the investigation was referred. There are other investigations underway, and I expect that there are some that we don't know about that may be underway that have not yet been made public.
And I want to turn, John Carlin, to you again on what has been referred and what hasn't. Could it be seen, though, at this early stage that it's good news for President Trump that based on the core, looking at the connections between the Trump campaign and Russian officials or vice versa, the fact that there are no further indictments, if that turns out to be accurate, is that good news for the president?
So if there are no further indictments of individuals for criminal crimes conspiring with Russians, it would be good news, I think, for the country. It's already been, we were going through an unprecedented period where the campaign manager of a major campaign has been convicted twice of getting, among other crimes, millions of dollars from Russian-affiliated interests. We've had a national security advisor plead guilty to lying about Russian contacts. We've had numerous Russian agents indicted for their actions in trying to undermine our election. And that's just from the Mueller special counsel. We've already had cases referred back to the National Security Division, including a case that resulted in the indictment of Russian actors for trying to interfere in the 2018 campaign, our most recent election. But is it good news for the president? I think that for that, we need to step back and think about the separation of powers. This was a fact gathering. It looked like from the beginning that there's an Office of Legal Counsel opinion that would prevent the special counsel from issuing an indictment against the president. These will be the factual record that then is given to Congress, and it will be their role to consider that factual record and whether or not it warrants them taking action through their power of impeachment.
Amy Jeffers, how do you read what we know about whether or not a recommendation can be made to indict the president? And does it sound to you, and again, what we have at this point is piecemeal, does it sound to you at this point as if that will not take place? There will not be a recommendation to indict the president?
I don't think there will be, and I never expected that there would be, given the policy pursuant to the OLC memos. I think, though, that means that largely what will be the content of this report will be the evidence that they gathered that did not lead to charges. Although I think the report will also describe the evidence that was collected that did lead to charges that are already in the public domain. But I think there will be evidence described in the report that we don't yet know.
And just very quickly, John Carlin, what do you look for next? I mean, we're obviously waiting for the entire report to be released. We don't know if it will be. What are you looking for initially?
I think it will take a period of time as they go through the report, and I think we need to, number one, not wait to take action to protect our elections or to consider the information that's already been made public. And then number two, where we do need to wait, is and ensure that the information in that report reaches the public, because voters have a right to know, and also reaches the critical oversight committees so they can take what necessary steps they need to take to protect our country.
John Carlin, former Justice Department official, Amy Jeffers, former federal prosecutor. Thank you both. And joining us now at our studio in Washington, our regular Friday news analysis team, Mark Shields and David Brooks. Hello, gentlemen. It looks like we have a little bit of news, although we don't know what the news is in the news. We are waiting for more information. We're going just on the thinnest of threads. But Mark, based on what we're hearing, and of course we just heard from two individuals who have worked at the Justice Department, have been a federal prosecutor, if it's the case there are no indictments being recommended, that's going to bring a sigh of relief from this White House, isn't it?
I would say it is, Judy. I mean, we know about Robert Mueller, that this has been leak-proof, and that he has a reputation for incredible thoroughness. And I think the relief, or maybe the question will turn out to have been the indictment, or whether they can indict a sitting president or not. I don't know, quite frankly. But I mean, let's be frank. 34 people have been indicted, right? Six associates of the president. 5 have pleaded guilty. I mean, we are. This is not for naught. It's not an empty exercise by any means.
David, how do you read what little bit we know so far?
I mean, the news event is a piece of paper was handed from one office to another office. That's what happened today. This takes place in a political context, and I think a lot of people, we've been talking about the Mueller report, and some people were treating it as the Messiah that was going to come and rid them of Donald Trump, and there was an expectation that it would shift fundamentally the ball game. Right now, there are daily allegations about Trump, about this or that, bad tweets. Republicans have stuck with him, Democrats have opposed, and we've been in this World War II situation. And so the question is, does the report change that trench warfare, essentially? And if there are no indictments, I really have trouble seeing how it does that. No indictments on collusion, but even the ones I expected there might be were on the obstruction piece. And this started as an obstruction investigation after the Comey firing. And so if there's no indictments even on obstruction, then there'll be bad stuff, presumably, but we'll fundamentally probably be in the same situation. And so I think the smart money for the past months has always been shifting, as we've been saying, to the Southern District of New York, into his financial crimes. The collusion, I've always been a skeptic, just because I don't think there was a Trump campaign. There was no organized thing to actually do the collusion.
So it sounds, I mean, David is saying, in essence, Mark, that yes, there have been referrals to the Southern District of New York, but they don't appear to go to the heart of what this investigation was about. That's the reason they were referred to the Southern District.
Yes, I mean, remember, Bob Mueller had a pretty narrow mandate, which was Russia and Russia's involvement in this election. I mean, so I mean, in that sense, but I do agree, Judy, that what we have beyond being astonishing leak-proof is the question of what does come out. I mean, you recall the Starr report coming out in all its graphic, specific, embarrassing detail, and
about President Clinton.
About President Clinton, and the policy has been in the past, the Department of Justice, that you do not identify anybody who is targeted, but against whom no legal action was taken. So we don't know what the status is of the report of the president or anybody else at this point. I mean, unlike in the Comey investigation, where he felt obliged to make his statements about Hillary Clinton, the presidential candidate in 2016.
I'm going to ask both of you to stand by, sit there and wait with me, because on the phone right now is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, Congressman from California. Congressman Schiff, obviously we're in the very early moments, hours of having this report transmitted from the special counsel Robert Mueller to the Office of the Attorney General. The briefings have not yet happened, I gather, at your end, but what do you know so far?
Well, I think what we know so far is that this report is going to deal with the decisions to prosecute certain people and the decisions not to prosecute others, why the special counsel felt the evidence was sufficient as to some, but not as to others. The important point here, though, is this focuses predominantly on the criminal investigation. But this investigation began as a counterintelligence investigation, and that may be the far more significant side of the House, because that goes to the question of whether the president or anyone around him has been acting either wittingly or unwittingly as an agent of a foreign power. And it's going to be very important, number one, that the report is made public so the public understands what decisions the special counsel made and the criminal evidence. But it's going to be even more important, potentially, that the Congress understand if there are counterintelligence risks, that this president or those around him are acting not in the national interest, but because they have some pecuniary interest or because they're beholden or compromised in any way. The Congress, and our committee in particular, has a statutory right to know, and we expect that the Justice Department is going to share that information with us because they're going to have to.
Well, when you remind us that this investigation began as a counterintelligence investigation, what does that say about what we may or may not be seeing right now in this report?
It means that what we are going to see when the report is made public, and we may have to fight the Attorney General to make sure that happens, but in a very bipartisan showing on a very polarized issue, the House quite overwhelmingly said, we expect this to be made public. That may only tell us about prosecutorial decisions that may shed very little light on the issue of compromise. And to give you one very graphic illustration, the president during the campaign sought to consummate something that would have been among the most lucrative deals of his life, and that is the building of a tower that would have required Kremlin support at a time when he was publicly espousing a new relationship with Russia and praising Vladimir Putin, whose green light might be necessary for that project. That is obviously deeply compromising, but that may not be much of the report, because whether it was criminal or not will go into the report, but what is essential in terms of the public safety and the security of the country is another matter entirely.
And Congressman, what do you make of these early reports that this will not include any further indictments than what we've already seen?
Well, I think a couple things. First, that means that this office, the special counsel's office, which is essentially like an outside counsel for the Justice Department, it won't be bringing any future indictments. That doesn't preclude either the Maine Justice Department or the Southern District of New York or other elements of the Justice Department from bringing indictments, and I think is very possible given the number of redactions in the Mueller pleadings that suggest other investigations that are still ongoing. But the last point that I want to make, because it addresses the conversation you were having before I came on the line, is this issue of does the department share information about people not indicted? And it's important for people to know that During the last Congress, the Justice Department shared over 880,000 pages of discovery with the Congress in an investigation in which no one was indicted. About Hillary Clinton, about Bruce Orr, about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, about Andy McCabe and others. And it did so because of the intense public interest, and it did so because Congress insisted on transparency. And as I told them at the time, they are not going to get away with a double standard. If the Congress changes hands, as it has, we will insist on the same level of transparency as to this even more important investigation. So the department may speak in generalities about that, but the reality is it departs from that policy when the public interest demands it, and here, clearly, the public interest demands it.
Congressman Adam Schiff, Chair of the House Intelligence Committee, thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us. And again, I'm joined in our Washington studio by our analysts, Mark Shields and David Brooks. David, you hear the Congressman, Chairman Schiff, making a point about transparency and saying this is paramount right now.
Yeah, I think we're all uncomfortable with the idea that prosecutors dump a bunch of information on someone they decide not to charge. That's generally the rule, and so I understand their suspicion, but I think Adam Schiff's argument is essentially the correct one, that there are exceptions to this case, and when you're investigating the President of the United States over something where he may have compromised national security issues, I do think making it public is the weight is on that side. And once they make it public to Congress, we'll all know. And so Mueller has not leaked, but we're about to have a little fight over how much we release, but I suspect by the end of the day, everything will come out.
Mark, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I do want to come back to this, the point that Chairman Schiff made about the distinction between what's the criminal investigation and what's the investigation into counterintelligence, the Russia piece of this, which there have been a number of indictments around that so far. But we don't know yet how many more shoes, if any, there are to drop on.
No, we don't. And I mean, his point that whether the president wittingly or unwittingly is dealing with a foreign power. I was rather struck by Mitch McConnell, who's if anything else, he's very careful. He made a statement today saying, when this came out, that many Republicans have long believed that Russia poses a significant threat to American interests, which is sort of. I mean, he's not someone given to idle chatter, and I don't know, but I think that's where the focus is going to turn. And obviously, his mention, he said Maine Justice Department, or the Southern District of New York as well.
I want to come back, pick up on that, David, if you want to, but I do want to come back to your point earlier about how much energy and time, and this was Yamiche and Lisa were speaking about this earlier, how much time and energy and oxygen has been expended in Washington over the last 2 years plus, reflecting on this, anticipating this, wondering what's going to happen, and a lot of fingers pointed at the president.
Yeah, a fair investigation is worth it, even if it doesn't come up with indictments. You have to investigate things that even if just to find out what happened. And when the president of the United States campaign team has a meeting in the Trump Tower with the Russians, that merits an investigation. And if you come up and there's no further indictments, I think we trust Robert Mueller and we say, well, good job. And thank you for your service. That doesn't mean it's going to change the politics, but I do think an investigation has been done and a sign that American institutions can actually work.
And again, picking up on what Chairman Schiff said, Mark, about, yes, we now know, at least if we believe Michael Cohen, the president's lawyer, there were continuing efforts to try to strike a deal over a Trump tower in Moscow, well into the campaign.
That's right. Well into 2016 is what Michael Cohen has testified.
There are decisions lawyers make and there are decisions voters make.
That's right.
And whether Michael Cohen and whether Trump was complicit or bowing down to Vladimir Putin for this reason or another, that's a decision more for voters than for lawyers, I would say.
At this stage, though, I think both of you have said this, when we don't know any more than we know, we want to be careful about assuming.
We do. And I mean, that's whatever Robert Mueller is and has been. I mean, his career has been one of being careful, being thoughtful, being complete, and not rushing to judgment. So whatever he delivers will be taken with gravitas and seriousness by any fair-minded person. Obviously, partisans on both sides will
Yes.
go to their corners. But I mean, I can't think of a public figure who would have been more credible in this situation.
You,
At a
you
time-
haven't seen leaks.
And it's at a
his
moment when
office.
Sean Hannity and many others have been going after Robert Mueller day
Yep.
after day after day.
Now
He
they'll
must
be
have felt
praising.
incredible temptation to strike back in some way, but he just took it and delivered the report.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm trying to compare this with other investigations where the leaks have been at a minimum. This may hold the record for the
Incredible.
fewest bits of information shared with the press, with the public.
He ought to be the personnel director for any president administration. I mean, the people he chose are exactly like him. They've been just as circumspect, just as discreet, and just as tight-lipped.
All right. Well, it has just literally come out in the last hour or so. We learned at 5 o'clock Eastern that the report had been submitted, and the Congress was notified. And now we wait. We see what happens. Mark Shields, David Brooks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, a look at the mounting toll taken by the ongoing flooding across the Midwestern United States. Thousands of homes are damaged and vast swaths of farmland underwater, leaving local residents and public officials trying to cope. In some places, the floodwater swallowed entire neighborhoods and washed away bridges.
There goes the Mormon Canal Bridge right there. It just washed out.
Swelled with rainwater and snowmelt, the Missouri River crested to its third highest flood level on record. The Missouri River's flood crest breached numerous levees, including one that destroyed a water treatment plant in the small town of Peru, Nebraska.
There's no potable water in town other than the 2 days supply approximately in the city's water tower. And that's being supplemented now by the National Guard bringing in pallets of water and local church groups as well.
Record-breaking late winter floods have led to statewide emergency declarations in Mississippi, Missouri, Nebraska, and Wisconsin. In Nebraska, floodwater rendered roads and entire highway routes impassable. For farmers across Nebraska and Iowa, the record floods have been especially devastating, with many losing much of their livestock and last year's harvest. The Nebraska National Guard has taken to airdropping bales of hay, attempting to save horses and cattle trapped in flooded fields and at risk of starving to death. In Iowa, the flooding has caused an estimated $1.6 billion in damage. For Nebraska, the damage to the state's livestock sector alone is projected to be $400 million. On Thursday, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, released a report forecasting a potentially unprecedented flood season in the current year. NOAA forecasts that 25 states, nearly two-thirds of the lower 48, are at risk of serious flooding this spring. And with us now on the phone is Pete Ricketts. He's the Republican governor of Nebraska, whose state, as we just reported, has felt much of the brunt of the flooding. He's been monitoring conditions all over the state. Governor, thank you for talking with us. Tell us what you are seeing.
Well, the devastation is the most widespread that we've ever had in our state's history. I've flown the Platte River, the Elkhorn River, the Loup River, the Niobrara, the Missouri, and all these major river systems are flooding at record levels that we've never seen before here in the state. And so in many cases, for example, you can't see where the channel of the river is supposed to be. I was flying with the vice president on Tuesday when he came to our state, and I couldn't tell where the Missouri River was supposed to be, where Nebraska ended and Iowa started. The Elkhorn River looked like the Missouri River normally does. It was just really stunning to see that much water coming through our state all at the same time.
How have conditions changed in the last few days?
Well, water levels are beginning to drop, and that's the good news. So people are being able to get back to their homes and start the cleanup and recovery process. We had several cities that were isolated. Fremont, Nebraska, for example, was really, you couldn't get there by road for about 48 hours. And so now people can drive to and from Fremont. The city of Columbus was a peninsula. That's gotten better. Waterloo was another community that was isolated. We can get there now by road. So with these water levels dropping, we're seeing more people returning to their homes. The number of people in our shelters is going down. But there's still going to be a long road of cleanup left ahead of us.
Tell us who is feeling the toll of this the most. I mean, we've just seen and we've spoken about what the farmers are dealing with. Give us the bigger picture there.
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly our farmers and ranchers are feeling a lot of the damage here. We estimate about $400 million in cow-calf losses, about $440 million in crop loss. We've had over 2,000 homes, over 340 businesses damaged, probably about $85 million worth of homes and businesses damaged. And then our infrastructure has really taken a lot of the heat, about $439 million, we think there. At one point, 20% of our roads were impacted, our state highways, that is, and we've still got about 200 miles of highways that will not be usable until they can be fixed. And just to give your listeners an impact here is over 85% of our counties have declared an emergency. This, like I said, is the most widespread.
And Governor, how long is it going to take for things to get back to normal?
Well, this is going to take many months to recover from it. You know, these major infrastructure projects like the roads I mentioned, we've got 16 bridges out. This is all going to take time to fix. We want to move as quickly as possible, and that's why our team worked very quickly with FEMA to get a disaster declaration in place. We were able to submit a disaster declaration on Tuesday, and FEMA got to the White House very quickly, and we got the disaster declaration yesterday. So that will help us by tapping into those resources both for public and individual assistance. And I know the resilience of the Nebraska people here. We've got a drive going on right now to raise money called Nebraska Strong. We're going to rebuild even bigger and better than before, and we'll get through this together.
Well, Governor, we are thinking of you and all the people affected by this flooding, this terrible inundation that you've been dealing with. Governor Pete Ricketts of Nebraska, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
In the day's other news, President Trump announced that he is withdrawing sanctions his administration placed on North Korea just yesterday, an issue that caused his summit with Chairman Kim to collapse last month. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said the president, quote, likes Chairman Kim and doesn't think these sanctions will be necessary. Yesterday, the Treasury Department sanctioned 2 Chinese shipping companies believed to be helping the North evade sanctions. Meanwhile, North Korea abruptly pulled its staff out of a liaison office with South Korea near the demilitarized zone. South Korea's vice unification minister expressed his disappointment.
Our government finds the North's decision regrettable, and it is hoped that the North returns its staff to the liaison office for normal operations as it was agreed between the two countries. We want to monitor the situation for a bit longer and respond to the developments instead of making predictions or premature judgments.
North Korea gave no reason for withdrawing its staff. The office opened last September in a bid to improve diplomatic ties between the two Koreas. New Zealand held a National Day of Remembrance to mark 1 week since 50 people were shot to death in a massacre at 2 mosques. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was one of thousands in Christchurch who observed the Muslim call to prayer at a park next to where the shooting began. An imam from one of the mosques told the crowd the country stands as one.
We have shown that New Zealand is unbreakable and that the world can see in us an example of love and unity. We are broken-hearted, but we are not broken.
Elsewhere in Christchurch, thousands of mourners gathered for a burial ceremony for 26 of the attack victims. The death toll from a powerful cyclone on the African continent surpassed 600 people today as the floodwaters slowly began to recede. The storm battered Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. Aid agencies warned that the toll could easily top 1,000 people. John Irvine of Independent Television News filed this report from one of Mozambique's hardest hit areas.
These children have lost everything and everyone. They've been rescued and ferried to safety, but they're on their own, orphans of the flood. The rescue operation out of Beira has involved local fishermen conducting a Dunkirk-style evacuation, going and getting those stranded way out there and bringing them back here. Most of the people rescued have survived an epic flood. They're from in and around the town at the heart of the giant lake created inland, the town of Bouzy, where for the most part life has been lived on rooftops since the cyclone struck. First came the wind that ripped apart many homes, then came the floodwaters that made any indoors left uninhabitable, and so it was to the rooftops that they retreated with all they could manage. For 8 days, they have survived on the bare minimum.
We need food. Yeah, we need food, we need clothes, we need shelter.
The only good news in Bouzy is that water levels are receding and the weather forecast is better. The cyclone is probably the worst natural disaster in Mozambique's history, and to say the government here has been overwhelmed would be an understatement. Here in Bouzy, the relief effort has been minimal at best. By and large, these people have had to rely on themselves. The cyclone has been a cataclysmic event here. Lives, livelihoods, livestock, crops and homes. The costs are huge and will define this area for the foreseeable future.
Horrible. That report from John Irvine of Independent Television News. 2 U.S. soldiers died in an operation in Afghanistan today. That brings the total number of American troops killed in the country this year to 4. Word of their deaths came as the U.S. is negotiating with the Taliban to bring an end to the 17-year-long war. Some 14,000 U.S. troops are stationed in Afghanistan. In U.S. economic news, stocks plunged on Wall Street today amid growing fears about a slowdown in the global economy. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted 460 points to close at 25,502. The Nasdaq fell 196 points, and the S&P 500 slipped 54. The government of Syria today vowed to take back the Golan Heights, one day after President Trump recognized Israel's sovereignty over the disputed territory. Israel captured the strip of land on the Syrian-Israeli border during the Six-Day War in 1967. Iran also condemned President Trump's move today, contending that it will destabilize the region. And in Istanbul, Turkey, its president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, echoed those concerns.
President Trump's unfortunate statement yesterday with regard to the Golan Heights has brought the region to the brink of a new crisis and new tensions. We will never allow, cannot allow, the legitimization of the occupation of the Golan Heights.
A spokesman for the British government also said the United Kingdom refuses to recognize Israel's sovereignty in Golan and has, quote, no plans to change its position. And police in Charlottesville, Virginia, today arrested a 17-year-old boy for posting online threats of, quote, ethnic cleansing. They targeted Black and Latino students at a local high school, prompting authorities to close all of the city's schools for 2 days. Charlottesville has struggled to combat racism after a white nationalist rally turned violent in 2017. At the time, President Trump was criticized for saying that there were, quote, fine people on both sides of the issue. Today, the city's police chief offered this warning.
We want the community and the world to know that hate is not welcomed in Charlottesville. Violence is not welcomed in Charlottesville. Intolerance is not welcomed in Charlottesville. And in Charlottesville and around the globe, we stand firmly in stating there are not very fine people on both sides of this issue.
The city's schools are expected to reopen on Monday. After nearly 5 years of fighting in Iraq and Syria, the Trump administration signaled today that ISIS no longer controls any territory in either country. The brutal final battle has taken place in eastern Syria, in Baghouz, near Iraq's border. But this is not nearly the end of ISIS. Special correspondent Jane Ferguson is on the ground in Syria for the NewsHour.
Nighttime barrages marked the final days of the Islamic State. U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, rained heavy gunfire down on ISIS after dark, as American and coalition airstrikes hit targets below. The attacks caused the encampment to catch fire. Stopping briefly to reload, the troops prepared for the next onslaught.
Every night, these troops come onto this small hilltop and hammer the ISIS positions just below, just behind us. So far, ISIS continue to hold out despite the onslaught.
In the day, ISIS can see again, and reaching the front line is more risky. Down below, on the edge of Baghouz village, the dying caliphate. A desperate patch of churned up land and abandoned trucks. Thousands of lives have been lost reaching this small, muddy patch by the river Euphrates.
It has taken over 4 years and an international coalition to back ISIS into this tiny corner just over this berm. But even now, they're having to show some restraint because all around in the area, they know there will be civilians embedded in there with ISIS.
Nearby, snipers picked off fighters who popped up from the tunnels and trenches ISIS had dug. This SDF soldier, called Reynas, told us he believed there were still several thousand ISIS loyalists down there. There are still women there, he told us. There are female fighters, around 50. In recent weeks, tens of thousands of ISIS members, men, women, and children, as well as their Yazidi captives, have surrendered and streamed out of the stronghold, many sick and exhausted. Dozens of children died on the miserable march before making it to the trucks that take them to refugee camps.
We left Iraq because of the airstrikes and artillery bombing. We came to Syria and the same thing happened to us.
For the victors, the final defeat of ISIS marks the end of a long and bloody campaign. Today, the White House said the ISIS caliphate had lost all its territory.
Well, there's ISIS, and that's what we have right now, as of last night. That's what we have right now.
On Friday, fighting continued in Baghouz as some ISIS fighters remain. This is the end for the ISIS dream of its own state, stretching across the Middle East and North Africa. But this is far from the end of ISIS. Syrian Democratic Forces spokesman Mustafa Bali reminded us that ISIS are still present, but hidden.
ISIS sleeper cells are active every day. The ISIS ideology is still very strong. It's not over.
This is a milestone, but it's not the end of ISIS.
Analyst Hassan Hassan of George Washington University has watched the Syria war from its earliest days and the rise and fall of the Islamic State.
You're no longer facing a physical ISIS, now you're facing a nebulous ISIS where you have to follow an entirely different approach in fighting them. So it's no longer sort of a military challenge. Primarily, it's more like a security challenge. And, you have to go and try to find out the sleeper cells, the sympathizers, the support network that they have in Iraq, Syria, and even beyond that.
Senior American military officials tell the NewsHour that the sheer numbers that came from Baghouz surprised U.S. forces, and that the level of strong, unrepentant ideological commitment to ISIS represents a longer-term threat.
I do not regret joining Islamic State. If my husband hadn't insisted for the kids, I wouldn't have come out. He insisted so he can get treatment. It's the same death if I die here or in Baghouz.
The ideology itself will continue to exist. They are because it never didn't start with ISIS. It predated ISIS and will continue to exist after ISIS. The conditions that existed because of the fight against ISIS have now worsened compared to what they used to be before ISIS.
ISIS fighters are still believed to be in the area surrounding Baghouz, hiding. Even the Syrian fighters on the battlefield don't like to drive through here. Roadside bombings began months ago. The group's evolution from army to insurgency continues. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Jane Ferguson in Baghouz, eastern Syria.
We return now to our lead story. Special counsel Robert Mueller has concluded his investigation and turned over a report to Attorney General William Barr. To help us understand what's next, I'm joined by NPR's Justice correspondent, Carrie Johnson. Carrie, so we know, we've just learned within the last couple of hours that this report, this investigation has finished, and the report's been turned over to the Justice Department. What happens right now? When do we find out what's in the report?
Well, we could find out something about the key conclusions by the special counsel as early as this weekend. That's according to the Attorney General Bill Barr and a letter he sent to key members of the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. The Justice Department says the public may find out around the same time, as early as this weekend, some of the key conclusions. As for the meat and potatoes of this report, which I'm told is comprehensive, we may find out more about that after a longer deliberation by the Attorney General, Special Counsel Mueller, and the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein.
Carrie, do we have any sense of how many pages, how big a document this report is?
I pressed the Justice Department this afternoon about how much detail this report gets into. All they would say at this point is that it is a comprehensive report. A Justice Department source says the special counsel is not recommending any additional indictments, Judy, although we do know some of his work, some of the offshoots, have been farmed out to prosecutors in New York, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and DOJ headquarters as well.
And Carrie, when we spoke a short time ago with the chairman of the House of Representatives Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, he pointed out that these recommendations, whatever they may be in this report, that this is separate from any counterintelligence work that was being done. What do you think that may tell us? What do your sources tell us that may mean about these final conclusions?
Well, it depends on how Robert Mueller has decided to write this report and how the Attorney General wants to interpret it. Judy, I don't expect we're ever going to see some of the sensitive material that's secret, that goes to sources and methods of American intelligence capacities that Adam Schiff may be able to see in Congress. The public may never get to see that. But the open question right now is whether the Justice Department will decide to tell Congress and the American people a little bit more about why Robert Mueller decided not to charge certain people. That's been an ongoing source of controversy ever since the former FBI Director Jim Comey decided not to charge Hillary Clinton with any wrongdoing, but said a lot of bad things about her. The open question now is whether this Justice Department will make a different choice in this investigation.
And as the Attorney General's letter to Congress said, this report explains the prosecution or declination decisions, meaning declining to prosecute. Just quickly, Carrie, what about the White House being notified about this? What's the protocol at this point in terms of sharing it with Congress, sharing it with the White House?
I'm told from the Justice Department that they did place a call to the White House counsel's office around 4:45 this afternoon to notify them the report was in. The White House does not have the contents of this report, only the notification at this time. And right now, the White House is deferring all questions and substance to the Justice Department, which basically is the way it should be in the way that investigations like this are run.
So we don't know when and if. The White House assumed at some point they will be briefed, but we don't know when. Well, we are certainly waiting.
We
and
expect that, Judy, yes.
Yeah, and I know you are waiting, and I'm guessing you're going to be camping out at the Justice Department this weekend. Carrie Johnson with NPR, we thank you.
We have the last few days. Thank you.
And on the NewsHour online right now, as we wait for that story, we do have much more on the Mueller report, including an in-depth timeline of the Russia investigation. You can explore that on our website, pbs.org/NewsHour. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Judy Woodruff. Have a great weekend. Thank you, and good night.
You're watching PBS.